from the 1980s, and now we're going to show the final film for tonight, which is going to focus on the railways of Waterford. So we're going to see some scenes from Sally Park Yard taken during the modernisation of the freight depot there in the mid-1970s, as well as some shots from the former Mallow-Waterford line, followed by developments at Balnacourty. And this opening shot doesn't begin in Waterford, but begins at Lavistown Junction on the main line from Dublin to Waterford. So we're a little bit north of Waterford itself. But here we have a 121 class hauled Bell Liner train. And in those days, there was no direct curve. So all trains heading to and from Waterford all had to go into Kilkenny, run round and come back out again. So the passenger train has gone into Kilkenny and then heads south to Waterford, while the Bell ferry train continues its journey north to Dublin, as mentioned, hauled by a 121 class locomotive B129. These were all taken around 1971 or 72. That's an oil train, I think, coming up from the Waterford direction. And that's a local goods working, which includes some ex-Great Northern cement vans. So there goes the oil train heading north. I think this may have been around the time when oil traffic for Balnacourty was routed via North Wall. So we move now to Dunkit area, just west of Waterford, where the main line from Dublin, as well as that to Limerick, diverge. So this is a permanent way train with a 35-ton steam crane, some ballast wagons, including the old and newer types. And it's bridge 186 at Dunkit. This was spanning the old Dublin-Waterford road on the Limerick line. So that's a passenger working heading into Waterford. Then a liner train hauled by a GM diesel crosses the bridge heading in the Limerick direction. So that road is the R448, formerly the N9 Dublin-Waterford Road. And the steam crane you saw, as mentioned, that was the Limerick steam crane, 35 tons, dating from 1920. So a passenger working heading into Waterford in this shot. And you can see there's some minor work still being carried out on the bridge. And there's the old bridge pieces in Sally Park Yard. So Joe captures the pieces being collected and being taken away for scrap. Now we're at Shorebridge Junction, or Waterford West. We have a passenger train arriving from the Dublin direction. So the line in the foreground leads to Balnacourty, the line in the middle leads to Limerick, and the far one on the right is from Dublin. And we have a double-headed GM diesel train coming off the Shorebridge with an empty Dolomite working from Balnacourty. I believe there are 2 daily workings, 18 wagons of Dolomite wagons between Bennett's Bridge and Balnacourty. So after running round in Waterford, the train continues along the main line up towards Dublin, towards Bennett's Bridge. And they arrive back into Waterford laden this time. This was taken after A classes had been replaced by the GM diesels because they were struggling, seemingly, the A class with the stop-start nature on the Balnacourty branch. This was on a different occasion with a Dolomite train headed with a 121 class locomotive, I think it was B121 herself, taking the curve at the Suir Bridge. And that's followed by the preserved A-class locomotive, A39R, which survives in preservation by the Irish Traction Group at the Downpatrick and County Down Railway. So it's a few glimpses of Waterford Yard prior to the modernisation scheme. So this A-class hauled Mark II stock train arriving in from the Dublin direction, he's using the original formation through Sally Park, and in the foreground you can see the new lines being laid which skirt around on the riverside of the yard. And that's an oil train, again associated with the Balnacourty traffic, hauled by 2 GM diesel locomotives. And you can see there's a lot of permanent way gang working on the new formation. So these scenes were recorded around 1974 or late 1973, early 1974. So the signalman collects electric train staff that the driver has thrown. I think that was probably, might have been a train from Limerick, hauled by 2 GM diesels, one in super train livery and the other in the black and tan colours. So CIE was spending £300,000 on this modernisation scheme in Waterford. That's a similar train to the one we saw, B121 and B167 that we saw at Suir Bridge. A little bit closer to the station in Waterford now, B191 arrives into Waterford, certainly with a shorter train, which probably indicates this was destined for Rosslare Harbour. And a Dublin-bound train departing Waterford, formed of the relatively new air-conditioned Mark II stock in the super train livery. And Joe captures some of the men at work. So in this shot, it looks like they're assembling some points or some turnouts in Sally Park Yard. A magnesite train arrives into Waterford behind an A-class. So that was either working from Cork or Balnacourty. And in this shot, O54 with a ballast train is working along the new formation adjacent to the River Suir, which you can see in the background. So it's probably taken in winter 1974 because, according to the journal, on the 15th of December 1974, the up and down running lines were officially opened alongside Sally Park Yard. There's A39R again, this time with a passenger working, again formed of Mark II stock. And this is Waterford Station itself, B121, and another GM diesel. It's working a ballast train. And Joe captures all the rather heavy manual labour that was involved in the reconstruction and reworking of the track layout in Waterford Station. So again, captured around 1974. And in the background of this shot, you can see one permanent wayman removing the signal arm from one of the semaphore signals. And a sleeper train, hauled by a 121 class engine. So while all this work is going on, I think the normal workings continue. So 186, I think, has probably brought in a train from the Limerick direction. You have locomotive 189 and an unidentified GM diesel in the original black and tan livery. Again, formed up Mark II stock, almost certainly a Dublin train. And so the train departs. I think the locomotive on that occasion was B162 with the black and tan livery engine. And you can see someone has scrawled 1973 just on, I think, a piece of the baluster rock there, just to give an indication of the date. 054, you can see with a train from Dublin, and you can see he's using the new formation, heading through Sally Park. That's Waterford West signal cabin to the left. Again, on the new formation, B146, we've seen that engine already once before. I think possibly a Limerick to Rosslare Harbour train. I think it's probably taken in late 1974, early 1975. And departing on the new formation, A49R. You can see Waterford Station in the background, which in itself, at the time of this show, that this station is actually being replaced by a newer one, further in the Rosslare direction. Taken in summertime, I think it is. Joe captured some of the work to do with the sidings leading into Sally Park Yard. There's a Bell Ferry train heading for Frankcastle Wharf, which is where the original Bell Ferry terminal was located in Waterford. It was replaced by Bellevue, I think, in the mid-1990s. So again, a lot of manual labour with... and then we have some of the signals being replaced and removed, and Joe gets close to the action in this shot. I'm not too sure whether he was aware that that train was arriving on that track. I'm not too sure whether the driver knew also, but there you go. Oh, A46R, I think. Arriving into Waterford. Again, much brighter, sunnier conditions compared to the earlier shots. So I think it was taken around summer 1975. This is a permanent way train. And that's the freight depot at Sally Park. You can see the work on laying out the groundwork for the new sidings, taking away some of the old signal posts, which is a bit of a struggle in some cases. And a passenger train arriving in past Waterford West signal cabin. So again, these are taken after the main running lines were slewed adjacent to the river shore. I think this is a goods train on the New Ross branch. It's taken near Abbey Junction. I think part of this section of line has been recently converted into a greenway. The scrap you see in the wagons, they came from, I think, Stafford siding in New Ross. There's an old view of Wellington Bridge Station, B170, departing with a Rosslare-bound train. And in the mid-1980s, the scene at Wellington Bridge has been changed completely, and Joe captures 052 with a sugar beet train. This was taken, obviously, after the new loading facility was installed at Wellington Bridge. I think it was installed around 1980. So in these brief shots, we've transitioned from standard 8 to Super 8 film. And in the background, you can see another sugar beet train. This one was hauled by 005. He's shunting empty wagons, I think, in this shot. And that's the loader at Wellington Bridge, along with its own electric shunter. And that's Taylorstown Viaduct, with an empty train heading into Wellington Bridge. And you can see the distinctive brickwork, which is a reminder of the bridges or the viaduct's destruction during the Irish Civil War in 1923. So you can see where the bridge was repaired. This is an empty beet train arriving into Campile, when Campile was still a block post. These shots were taken around 1985 when the new double-deck beet wagons came into use. Now for the final part of the film show, we're going to look at some operations around Balnacorty as well as the Mallow-Waterford line. So this is work on the Balnacorty branch with one of the CIE Permanent Way Wickham inspection cars. It was taken around 1969 with the laying of the new line to the magnesite factory at Balnacorty. That's Balnacorty Junction. The line on the left is the old formation of the main line into Dungarvan. And this is Kilcummer Viaduct, taken near Castletown Roach. 1969 again, and it's the CIE lifting train heading towards Mallow. I think it's hauled by C-Class C212, which I think we saw at the beginning of the film show. That's followed by McGurk's lifting train, which was formed of ex-Great Northern Railcar, articulated railcar F. And here we see that railcar was UTA number 104. And Joe captures these scenes at the former station at Ballyhooly. I think the people in those shots might have been to do with the McGurk's contractors, these men you see here, or possibly the owners of the station at Ballyhooly. You can see an extension has already been put on the station building in 1969. Of course, passenger services over the Mallow-Waterford line ceased in March 1967. Here we see the lifting train at Carrick Viaduct, just east of Mallow, and the CIE lifting train with redundant rails arriving into Mallow behind C-Class C221. And also in Mallow was Railcar 104. Which is seen being shunted alongside the CIE train. And this is back onto the Balnacorty branch, captured near the junction, B171, leading a Dolomite train from Bennett's Bridge. As mentioned, the A-Class has struggled, I think, with the traction motors stopping and starting at the level crossings in Clonee. So Not long after the traffic commenced in 1970, they were replaced by double GMs. Joe just captured some shots of the disused line leading into Dungarvan. You'll see a shot of a rather forlorn-looking Dungarvan station. But back onto the Balnacourty branch. This is B170. Again, another Dolomite train. I think it's an empty working this time. This is just a permanent way train captured near Clonee Strand and called by A8R. Train seems to be made up of sleepers. As well as collecting some rails, it seems. This is one of the most spectacular sections along the Mallow-Waterford line, taken near Clonee Strand, and it features an awful lot in publicity of the Greenway nowadays. The semaphore signal there, that's for Knock level crossing. So A8R seems to be collecting some spare rails along the line here near Knock Gates. And this is a magnesite train approaching Balnacourty Junction. So that would have originated from Tivoli. So B158. And you can see on this occasion there are two trains in Balnacourty because we have the magnesite train and we have the empty Dolomite train heading back to Bennett's Bridge. And in Railfans News, Joe had actually recorded that on some particular days you had 3 or 4 trains into Balnacourty area in just one day. So on one occasion A48R arrived on a lifting train. That was followed by A9R on a Dolomite train, followed by an empty magnesite train, followed by an oil train. Now in this shot, Joe is observing the work in removing the turnouts at Balnacourty Junction. You can see he's gives an exacerbated expression because the men are working hard and quick, because you can see they have a magnesite train bearing down on them, and you can see that there's a crucial rail still missing. So a rail is hastily found and is put into place to allow the train to continue its journey. So B159, I think the engine is allowed to continue. And you can see in the foreground the track bed of the old line into Dungarvan. And then you can see it in the background of this shot with A9R with an empty Dolomite train heading back to Bennett's Bridge at a brief time when the A-classes handled these particular workings. So for the final segment of the film show, we're going to move to the Limerick to Waterford line, and specifically to Millerstown, just outside Clonmel, where Joe is on the case to record repair work being done to the permanent way after a derailment in this section of line in July 1973. So 7 wagons of a Limerick-bound goods train derailed at Millerstown on the 4th of July 1973. So Joe was here to record some of the permanent way work and use in reinstating the track. So that's B171. I think it's bringing some materials such as sleepers, brand new sleepers, to the work site. The upturned wagon that you saw at the beginning of this sequence, it was an ex-Great Northern cement hopper that was the culprit in this particular derailment. That's just B147, just with a single brake van in tow, followed by locomotive 001. It's heading in the Limerick direction. And we see B147 again. This time with 3 wagons. 4 actually. And he can be seen dropping off brand new sleepers. And this is Limerick Junction, B170, with a liner train from the Waterford direction, made up of 20 and 40 foot containers. And heading in the opposite direction is Sulzer locomotive B105, collecting the staff for the line section to Tipperary. That's crossing over the flat crossing at the north end of Limerick Junction on the Dublin-Cork main line. And as you can see here, the train went out to Millerstown and is seen depositing ballast along the newly laid permanent way. That's one of the Great Southern and Western Railway plough vans, you can see. And this method of dropping ballast with these wagons, that was still continuing until about 12 or 13 years ago, until the high output ballast wagons came on stream on Irish Rail. So B105, captured again just near Clonmel, having deposited the ballast. A60R with a short goods train. 2 brake vans on that particular train. That's followed by A7R on a magnesite train. And Joe also turned his attention to some of the, would have been the fairly new permanent way machines. I think this might be a ballast cleaner. So it's captured again in that section line between Clonmel and Millerstown. And this passenger working, you can see back in the early 1970s, you still had a lot of these 4-wheel vans included in the formation. And this is Carrick on Shore. A passenger train arriving in from the Limerick direction. And I have a similar video I shot myself back in 2002 of a 141 class working the Limerick to Rosslare train. But back in 2002, it was just a single Craven carriage and a guards van, whereas back when Joe captured, the train was a lot more substantial. And you see a goods train making its way gingerly along the newly permanent way at Millerstown. 055. That's the locomotive that's preserved by Sean Brown at Hell's Kitchen Museum in Castlereagh. You have A26R with a mix of magnesite and oil wagons. You'll see one of the wagons is actually a dolomite wagon that's been pressed into magnesite working, as you can has the tarpaulin over the top of it. That's to keep the magnesite dry, of course, during the inclement weather. Now we have a single 121 class, B135. And on this occasion, the return working with B135, he actually came to a complete stop here. And you can see in the foreground there's a culvert bridge that's being repaired. So I don't know whether they were a little bit apprehensive about going over the bridge, but certainly helped Joe capture this particular scene by train stopping. Unlike the previous train, 184 and I think another unidentified GM diesel goes over the same section of line a little bit quicker. And that's followed by one of the Wickham inspection cars. I think number 5 was the car number on that one. And some kids playing on a permanent way trolley. And a passenger train heading out of Clonmel station, recorded from the cattle bank at the Limerick Junction end of the station. And Joe captures this permanent way train hauled by A50R. I think the 6-wheel flat wagon there, that probably was at one point, at one time, a 6-wheel carriage. And you can see this train was being used to load up, I think, redundant sleepers. So A50R, having done its work, heads along, and you can see the permanent way men hitch a lift on the wagons themselves. And the train is shunted into the stub of the former line to Thurles. And that's the former line to Thurles, that Powerstown platform. So by this stage, the line had almost been completely lifted. So this is around 1971. Just a quick shot at Limerick Junction with a short magnesite and oil train crossing over the flat crossing at the north end of the junction. And this time a passenger working hauled by an A-class, a bit similar to the other one we saw, but it was with a GM diesel. Locomotive 010, I think it is. And that train we saw at Limerick Junction, we see it again here, with the driver and signalman exchanging staff. Might have been a different day with a few more wagons on it, but you can see it has that distinctive oil wagon with the frame on it. Signalman at Clonmel. And a permanent way train, and with flat wagons, exchanging staffs. I think locomotive 158. Looks like he's laden with a lot of redundant rails. And just a couple of more glimpses of the ballast cleaner. An unusual shot looking from the bridge, I think just outside Clonmel. An A17R, and you can see this is now well into the autumn time, with a mixed goods and sugar beet train. So that beat would have been destined for Turles Sugar Factory. I think it was more or less with the works completed at Millerstown. You can see the track is well bedded in. So 189 with a liner train from Waterford. And that's followed by a beat/goods train, hauled on this occasion by two A classes. I don't know whether one might have been a failure or simply a transfer. And B146, to preserve B146, which is still in use at the Downpatrick and County Down Railway, I think brings an end to tonight's film show. Passenger train departing Clonmel Station for Waterford. So that concludes the film show for 2024. I hope you enjoyed those films of Joe's, and thank you for attending tonight. Again, a great gratitude to Joe for recording all of those scenes, and gives a real variety of what the sort of trains that we had back in those days. So I'm going to hand you back to Neil, and I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thank you very much, Ciarán, for an absolutely wonderful show, and I'm sure I echo all our viewers tonight. It's an absolutely fabulous show of a bygone era that's now sadly gone.